Sanabria, and I'm the Regional Director for Region 5 of the AAAED. On behalf of Region 5 AAAED, we thank Dr. Kim Kirkland for taking the lead on this webinar and all panel members and their willingness to share best practices in implementing Title IX regulations. And we also want to mention that Dr. Kirkland is transitioning now. She is leaving her role as the Director of Equal Employment at IUPUI, Indiana University, Purdue University of Indiana, and she's taking on the role of Executive Director of Equal Employment at Oregon State University. So we all want to give her props for that. Congratulations on that. We look forward to a very engaged discussion. We also want to thank our sponsor, Manchester Consultants. Lastly, at the end of today's webinar, you will receive an evaluation. We hope you will consider sharing your thoughts as this assists us in Region 5 in the future for all AAAED learning opportunities. Sandra?
Okay, just a couple housekeeping tips. All attendees will be in listen-only mode except for Dr. Kirkland and the panel members. If you have a question or comment you wish to share, please type it in the control panel in the chat box area there. We'll certainly answer as many of your questions at the end of today's webinar as possible. Just as a reminder, the contents of this webinar are intended for general information purposes only and are not to be construed as legal advice or a legal opinion on any specific fact or circumstances. Without further ado, let's get this show going, Dr. Kirkland.
Thank you. Back that up. I'm not there yet. Oh, thank you. First, I would like to thank the three panelists who will be speaking to those online today about what's happening regarding Title IX at their campuses, some of the challenges that they face, what they're doing as it relates to training, and what the volume looks like, and those kinds of things, and any best practices that they are willing to share as it relates to how they're navigating through what everyone has seen over the last few years as an influx of reporting based on a myriad of reasons. But first, let me introduce the panelists to you. I'm going to give you a brief bio on each panelist, and then I want to provide a little context for the evolution of Title IX. Okay, so first, there is Margot Foreman. Margot began serving as Iowa State University's Director of Equal Opportunity in the spring of 2016. She manages equal opportunity, affirmative action, discrimination, harassment, and sexual misconduct programs, and serves as the university's Title IX coordinator. Margot comes to Iowa State after 17 years in the Equal Opportunity Office at IUPUI, and we wished her well. Margot earned her master's degree in public health. Under Margot's leadership, OEO works with members of the ISU community to resolve complaints of discrimination, sexual harassment, and sexual misconduct. Margot's role as Title IX coordinator includes working with students, faculty, and staff who have been impacted by various forms of sexual violence, including but not limited to stalking, domestic or dating violence, and sexual assault. Margot also co-leads the university's Sexual Misconduct Prevention Committee, Campus Climate Response Team, and Title IX Working Group. So give a warm welcome to Margot Foreman. Next, we have Ginger Arvin, who joined the Office of Equal Opportunity team at IUPUI as a senior investigator in February 2014. Ginger is responsible for investigating and resolving discrimination and harassment complaints to determine if compliance or policy violations exist, circumvent potential litigation, and propose corrective actions and/or interventions. Prior to IUPUI, Ginger worked for 20 years in various positions, including Title IX coordinator in the Special Education Student Services Department with the Indianapolis Public Schools. She also has investigative and supervisory experience in child protection services. Ginger obtained a specialist in counseling Counselor Education, as well as a Master's of Science in Counseling Counselor Education degree from Indiana University. And let's also provide Ginger a warm welcome. And our third panelist is Linda Millstone. Linda has held several positions at the University of Texas at Austin. She serves as Associate Vice President for EEO issues, including Title VII, ADA, Title VI, and age discrimination. She has served as the university's ADA coordinator, providing accommodations to both faculty and staff, as well as handling institutional issues such as accessibility to buildings and inserting captioning on videos. Currently, Linda handles investigations on campus, as well as serving as Deputy Title IX Coordinator for University Compliance Services. Linda has a Master's in Public Affairs from the LBJ School of Public Affairs, a certification in mediation, and she holds a senior professional in SHRM Resources, that SPHR certification. So let's welcome Linda as well as all three of our panelists. Thank you, ladies. Appreciate your participation today. So I am going to kickstart the panel discussion by just talking about briefly the evolution of Title VII. The regulatory, Title IX, right. Title IX, Title VII, not the same thing, but we're looking from the same lens almost. Title IX began in 1972. And back in 72, while it protected folks that participated in any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance, most educational institutions linked that theme to athletics, right? And so that was the premise of how most institutions thought about what Title IX was all about. Title IV of the Civil Rights Act of '64 required public schools to respond to sexual assaults committed against their students. And I would say that was public schools versus universities, right? The Clery Act required colleges and universities who participated in federal financial assistance to report annual stats on crimes, including sexual assault, rape, and those kind of things. And mostly that reporting responsibility was shouldered by the police department, right? And so from 72, I would say, as we go forward to 2011, on April the 4th, a Dear Colleague letter showed up on most campus, University of Georgia. I think that thing was about 19, 20 plus pages. It was very laborious. It had a lot of good information in it. However, people didn't know what to do with it. Why the DCL came about? Because there was an influx and in the media. I would say Penn State probably put the DCL on the map. But a lot of incidents of sexual assault and violence hit the media, brought more exposure to it. So the Vice President, Joe Biden, with the right arm of his spouse, Jill, they pushed this initiative, right? Because there was a lot of research and stats that there's a lot of sexual violence happening on campuses. And what we found was stuff was underreported, right? So DCL came out. What was it supposed to do? Provide guidance, pretty much around reporting, publishing, policy, implementation, and that kind of thing. Again, it was so laborious and tedious, it didn't really have teeth, and people didn't really do a lot around the DCL, except talk about what are we supposed to do as a result of the DCL, right? But however, our obligation was around a key thing that everybody was aware of, and that's timeliness. We got 60 days to do something, right? And so units and organizations started to do some stuff without a lot of guidance, put grievance procedures in place for students in particular, not necessarily faculty and staff, but particularly for students. And those grievance procedures, particularly on this campus, and Ginger will talk about that more, drove how we would handle Title IX complaints, the appeal, the review boards, that whole piece. After, dear colleague, the Campus Save Act came on top of the DCL, and what it did was put a little bit more teeth into clarity. It said, not only will you report crime statistics on campus and in the surrounding areas, it says you will report on rape, acquaintance rape, domestic violence, stalking, all of those things that we wasn't really reporting on. And it framed up what that would look like. So the what, the who, and the how came about with more teeth as a result of Campus Save. And lastly, I will say to you before we kick the panel off, that the VAWA, or Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act, is really where the teeth came in to enforce and influence how organizations respond to Title IX today. What it did was say you must report these things around violence, dating violence, stalking, crimes. You will train you will train responsible employees, and you will do some institutional policies and prevention kinds of things. So I would say that since its implementation, the campus awareness and understanding and response has been 360. We're doing a lot more. With that said, just a little frame and context of how my sense is campuses have evolved since our original thinking about Title IX and where we are today. I'm going to ask Margot Foreman to begin to speak to what's happening at Iowa State University. Margot?
Thank you, Kim, and thank you for letting us be a part of this at Iowa State. So what we found is the same things happening around the nation are happening on our campus. We have this higher alert of information regarding how do we address sexual assault, what does it look like for our campuses to have policies, institute different sorts of training. And so we are hitting most of those same target areas that we find in Title IX. At the same time, we know that we're not doing enough because our numbers reflect that. So at first you see a spike in reporting. You can contribute that to more education. And so when folks know what to do, they do it. But we also see a consistency that, we see folks coming in and out the door and know that the issues are not going away, that these incidents are not reducing at a rate that we would like to see happen. So we're reminded again by Vice President Biden before he left office of our obligation to continue the prevention side. And so here at ISU, we have for the last 8 months or so been mobilizing ourselves to address prevention in a more programmatic way, in a comprehensive way. It's important here at ISU that you are a cyclone in every sense of the word. However, we haven't really talked about the obligation of a cyclone to be a preventer, or how they are engaged in the process of making the campus safe from power-based violence. So what we've done is to talk about as a working group, a sexual misconduct leadership working group, and the subcommittee of that, what is it that we need to do or consider when we're going to bring a prevention program to campus? And so I just am going to talk to you today about some principles that really should be vetted out while you try to bring that comprehensive program onto your campus. A lot of times we've got everybody doing everything at one time. We don't know where everyone's hands are in the pot. We just know we're doing something. But how do we know that we have a program? How do we affect change? That's by collecting those strategies and bring them together in some sort of way that we know that we can count on replication, and that it's, that we know that we're getting great results. So the first of the principles, I want to talk about having comprehensive services. So I won't read the screen, but what's important about this is that our strategies need to have multiple components, so that we can address different learners, so we can address different issues in our Title IX programs or in the prevention program. These are some questions you might want to ask yourself. But what's important, the point is that effective programs address multiple areas of a person's life, such as health, education, social connections, social conditions, by providing services in a variety of settings. So you want to make sure those programs offer a wide variety of activities to address the target problem, which usually has multiple risk factors, not just one. So we know we've identified alcohol in some areas. It may be peer pressure. It may be routine violence that's happening in relationships or not knowing what healthy relationships are. These activities need to include several components, such as curriculum-based interventions, media campaigns, system changes, and the environmental strategies that affect the whole economy of the social engagements and conditions. If we move to the next one, we know we want to talk about varied teaching methods. So these are the strategies that include teaching methods of different types and activities that really talk about skill-based components. So what's important, as I say it, is that these programs need to focus on developmental skills that enable those who are participating to avoid those problem behaviors. The skills have to be associated to the effective prevention. So helping participants develop their cognitive thinking. How do they think? We talk about building critical thinkers on our campus. Their skills, their ability to communicate assertively and effectively, and their ability to negotiate and resist the problem behaviors. The program should provide some hands-on experiences for those participants. Rather than just developing or sharing information, discussion, or talking head, we need to talk about what are those facilitated activities that will be included. Are there role plays? Will there be written practices? Are they verbal? They'll allow those participants to develop the skills and to practice them. Next, I think it's, we need to talk about sufficient dosage, which I think is relevant to our one-time online training that a lot of campuses have gone to, because we need to have an effective way to show that we're actually training people. So we've leaned maybe a little bit too heavy on this online training process. So the question is, can the dosage be measured by the number of contact hours, or however you want to break that up? Is it including the number of sessions? What's the length of each one of those sessions? Are the programs effective by averaging a number of interactions that participants will be exposed to say there's an effective program? The amount of the dosage probably needs to produce positive outcomes when it's contingent on their participants' level of engagement. So it's not about just numbers, it's how they engage while they're in those doses. The greater risk factors for the participants, the greater the dosage necessary. So we know freshmen, that first 6 weeks, they are those who are maybe most vulnerable of being involved in these situations that lead to some of the things we're seeing on our campus. We know that there are marginalized populations that also are vulnerable. So those dosages may look different than it does for your seniors or those who are in graduate school. And we need to provide them so that they're diminishing over time. So we're talking about, instead of feeding them information, we're now looking to see them do some action. So in that theory-driven principle, which is next, we're talking about preventive strategies that are scientific and logical. So it's just not that they feel good, but we need to do the research. We need to, find out, are we basing what we're providing in our training programs or in this prevention program, because it's just not about training, is it scientific? Does it prove in itself to show some results? It should be that we take the time, and we spend a lot of time here talking about okay, what does the science tell us? What does the CDC say about these issues? What are we hearing from our local police forces? What are we hearing from the nation around what programs are effective or how to deliver programming? And so that's the considerations we've had as we reviewed what programs have to offer. So number 5 is that positive relationships. So the programs need to, and I'll wait for you to move the slide. So it needs to ensure that it's fostering access to healthy, positive relationships and defining them for intimate partnerships as well as peers. So when we say that it needs to support the development of those relationships by giving some strategies focused on peer-to-peer bystander intervention, such as trainings or such as those types of trainings that we see across campuses, teaching people how to stand up, how to be a friend, how to intervene, how to distract, how to move toward a different direction of behavior, as well as communication strategies that help establish intimate partner boundaries. So what does consent look like? When should that be negotiated outside of being engaged in a sexual interaction? How does one know that what continued affirmation or continued consent looks like, and when does that stop? Having those conversations that give words to folks who have not perhaps ever had to negotiate this conversation before, give them those words, help them see their strength, help them recognize that they have options. So when we move on, we want to talk about those programs being appropriately timed. So the program activities should be timed in an interval that maximizes the impact for those who are involved. They should focus on those risk factors or the risky behaviors before they start to develop, rather than waiting till the problem does develop. So being proactive versus reactive in nature. And they should be tailored to the intellect. What are the cognitive abilities? Where's the social development for the participants? So this is really speaks to that one-time only programming. So we should see programming that offers a pre-admission, starting to acclimate to the culture and the expectations of the campus around, you know, what would be the citizenship rules when you come to campus X to expect around sexual conduct. Also, once they enter into the university and our orientations, while that may be already long and laborious, we've got to find a way to have this conversation, to give this practice, making sure that we're being effective to give them opportunities to start to hear that then. Moving forward, as a freshman, we've already talked about that, or those who may be transferring into the university need an opportunity to hear that. But that's not the same message that you'll want to have developed for those individuals who you are graduating, going into the workforce. Hopefully the messages then are really talk about appropriateness in group behaviors, in professional behaviors, how to stand up as a leader, how to continue the practice in their professional life. So it is about finding out what the program is offering at the stages that your participants are at and making sure that you're matching those. So as we move forward, this is where we're finding really, and we're going to go back one, to social, culturally relevant programs. This is really where we need to spend some time in investing if those programs have the ability to be tailored or the content to be culturally appropriate and relevant to its participants. When those interventions aren't relevant, the program often has difficulty recruiting folks and retaining participants in them, making sure that those programs go beyond just the cosmetic pictures and images, but we do the work to do more than just tailor the language or the audio visuals, but go beyond that and making sure that the examples, the spaces. So I'm not going to be able to talk about consent to international students the same way that I'll be able to talk to consent for LGBTQA students. There are some things that are nuanced differences. There's a core message, but there are some things that need to be evaluated. How do I enter the conversation? How do I bring the cultural nuances that mean something, especially when we're talking about words that don't have any meaning in the culture that folks come from. So if the word consent is never available in someone's cultural background, this is not the time to just think they know what that means. We just make sure the program is gives that sort of background and reflection that is meeting the needs of those that are participating in it. Then we're talking about the outcome evaluation. So how do you know if you're doing it right? If you don't, at the beginning of your program, start to outline what will we use for evaluative tools, how we determine what we should change and tweak. It's time to do that along with the same time we're planning. We should kind of work backwards. What do we want to achieve? And then move your program out of that space and then start executing from there. Lastly, I want to talk about having well-trained staff. So across the country, there became this brand new position at most universities called the Title IX coordinator. The Title IX coordinator was our hottest spot to, you could look in higher ed jobs, higher ed, and find a job anywhere across the country if you wanted to be a Title IX coordinator because it became relevant. It takes more than one individual to do this work. So it's important that those who are coming to the table are well trained. They need to have the encouragement to do that, the intellect, the sensitivity to do it. They need to stay trained. They need to have a place to process, decompress, to re-energize. And that's really important because transparency in this work is essential. Someone needs to bring their authentic self to the place, and they need to be able to be sensitive. For ISU, what we are concentrating now are on two aspects. One, how do we be culturally relevant, and how do we bring that into the programming? Secondly, how are we using trauma-informed investigative tools and conversations to make sure that we're keeping those who are engaged safe, that we're keeping the process clean. How do we make sure that we are doing what we can to be better practitioners? In the long run, it's really about having well-trained staff. So those are just some of the things that I would say that as you start to bolster the preventive side of Title IX that you should think about.
Thank you, Margot.
Mm-hmm. Good afternoon. My name is Ginger Arvin, and as Kim said earlier, I'm a senior investigator in the Office of Equal Opportunity here at IUPUI. And I'm taking a slightly different approach to my presentation than Margot. I'm going to talk with you just a little bit about how IU, Indiana University, has gone about implementing Title IX. And first, just to give you a little bit of information about our campus, we're located in downtown Indianapolis, so we're considered an urban research university. We have approximately 30,000 students with 2,800 faculty and 18 schools, 18 schools and 2 colleges. For the most part, we're a commuter school, although housing on campus has increased. We just opened a new residential hall in August of 2016, and there are several opportunities for students to find housing surrounding the campus. So with that in mind, I thought it was important just to remind everybody about why it is that we do this work, in addition to the fact that it is federal law. But as Margot mentioned earlier about those young students coming to campus, you can see here one of the statistics talks about most assaults occur during the first or second year, and many were incapacitated when that happened. So thinking about those prevention efforts that maybe even can take place before students arrive to campus. I know here a survey goes out to new students and they're invited. It's not mandated, but strongly suggested that they take this survey, this online training that talks to them about sexual misconduct. So again, here are some of those statistics that I think we all should keep in mind around this issue. Dr. Kirkland has already talked to us about those federal laws that impact higher ed, in addition to Title IX, and we also have Title VII. So just talking to you, I want to talk to you about IU's sexual misconduct policy, which was revised in March of 2015, and it was expanded to include all of those areas that Bawa and Cleary tell us that we need to speak to. So it includes sexual harassment and sexual violence, dating violence, domestic violence, sexual exploitation, and stalking. Along with that, it basically applies to everybody on campus and those people who come to campus. So it speaks to Title IX and Title VII, and it speaks to all types of relationships, whether it's student on student or professor to student or peer to peer. It also talks about any type of university-related activity, whether something might happen on or off campus, and then also there's language around retaliation being prohibited. So in thinking about best practice and what would be in a policy, in our policy, consent is defined very specifically, and this is actually what it says. And when there's training with students, this consent language is discussed, and helping students to understand what it means to have consent to be involved in some type of sexual activity with another person. So you're welcome to go to our website, which I'll show you in a little bit, and see more about what our consent definition says. Along with that one of the things that we do with training is and I'm not going to show this video, but for the sake of time, but this is a really good video. It's about 2 minutes long that talks about consent, and it kind of re-emphasizes or emphasizes then what our consent language is all about. So if you ever have an opportunity to look at this YouTube video, I think it will help you understand how you can then get the information out about consent and connect it to the policy. Students really like this video. So the university has a website, and it's called Stop Sexual Violence. And on this website, there's information for pretty much anyone, whether you're a student or you're a staff or faculty. You can see here that it has subsections about how to get help, how to report, prevention and resources efforts going on campus, policies, key terms, and then there's also information around employee resources. So within IU, we have an individual who's in the role of a university Title IX officer. She's located in Bloomington, which is another one of our 4 campuses. And then on each of our 8 campuses, there are deputy Title IX coordinators. So the university Title IX officer, her role is to ensure that basically all campuses are implementing Title IX, and that we're all responding to all incidents of sexual misconduct, hopefully using a trauma-informed approach. And when we're following up on those reports, that we're making complainants and sometimes respondents aware of available resources, and if there are any interim measures that need to be put in place. You know, we're ensuring that we're following all policies and procedures, in addition to tracking the reports that we receive on all of our campuses. And then that annual training that is available or made available to investigators and other individuals on campus who are involved in implementing Title IX. So the university process and procedures, basically, you know, whenever the university knows or should have known about an incident around sexual misconduct, we must take immediate and appropriate action. On our campus, on IUPUI, we do things perhaps a little bit differently than maybe some other campuses. As far as who follows up on a complaint is dependent on the status of the respondent. So here at my office and the Office of Equal Opportunity, we follow up with those complaints where the respondent is a faculty person, a staff person, or a third party. Whereas our Office of Student Conduct, they are charged with looking into those reports when a student is the respondent. And so, you know, as with everyone, you know, we provide a prompt, fair, and impartial process and hopefully get that all accomplished within 60 days, which can be challenging at times. So I just pulled this from the website, but this is a diagram of how the university responds to reports of student sexual misconduct. Reports come to us in a variety of ways. Then there's an assessment made talking about next steps, which office does it go to, if there's going to be a formal investigation and potentially charges filed versus maybe trying to resolve that issue informally using some kind of alternative methods. Within our office, at the Office of Equal Opportunity, we kind of have a three-prong approach about how we go about following up on our complaints. Most of our complaints are resolved using consultation. Consultation could look differently depending upon your situation. It may be that someone just comes to the office and they want to, you know, have conversation. Others, it might be facilitating a discussion between a complainant and a respondent. Those cases involving domestic violence and dating violence and sometimes stalking, where the respondent is a non-IUPUI affiliate, then I would have a conversation with that target of that behavior and talk about how we can help that person be safe. Offer any type of resources and what interim measures might need to be put in place. So consultation, again, is kind of an informal, as I said, an informal way of following up on those reports. We do also have formal mediation, although we rarely use that in sexual misconduct cases. And then when the assessment of an issue warrants a formal investigation or a comprehensive investigation, then we would go about initiating an investigation while still offering resources and interim measures, notifying the relevant parties, and then completing a report and forwarding that to the decisional authority for any type of sanctions that might be needed in that situation, based upon the outcome of the investigation. So I'm hoping you can see this slide and see the numbers on here, but we do an annual report. We're in the process of compiling the information for 2016, but if you look for 2015, the numbers of reports that we received, the total was 144. This does include those reports from our Office of Student Conduct. So this is any type of sexual misconduct report for the calendar year 2015. You can see here that consult was the majority of the cases, 109. There were 33 investigations between my office, the Office of Equal Opportunity, and the Office of Student Conduct. And then we had 2 agency complaints that came in. So you can see the difference between 2015, 144, to 2011, where there were 29. And quite sure the increase in the reports that we receive are around training for individuals on campus, especially responsible employees. So they now, excuse me, understand that even though someone may say to them, I really don't want you to tell anybody about this, they still have an obligation to make a report. So breaking it down into the subcategories of sexual misconduct, last year we had 20 reports around dating and domestic violence, 47 around sexual assault, 52 around sexual harassment, and 25 was stalking. Again, consult being the primary way that the reports were followed up. And then this is just the information specifically for students as the target of the behavior, not necessarily students being the respondent of the behavior, but a student being the target of the behavior. So again, you can see 117 students and the ways that we followed up on those reports based upon the different subcategories. So as Margot mentioned, prevention, bystander intervention is a key approach in prevention and education. You know, it encourages the community to engage and take some responsibility. It reduces that victim blaming and helps foster social change. So I just briefly put on here some of our information around campus resources, those reporting resources, and our confidential resources. We do have a brochure, a resource brochure that you can check out on the Stop Sexual Violence website, and information around community partners that we have in the Indianapolis area. And lastly, I just wanted to end with a quote from President Obama with the It's On Us campaign, just helping us to all understand that, you know, as it says here, perhaps most importantly, we need to keep saying to anyone out there who has ever been assaulted, you are not alone. We have your back. I've got your back.
Thank you, Ginger. Appreciate it. And just to keep the flow moving, next up we have Linda Millstone.
Thank you for inviting the University of Texas at Austin to participate in this webinar. We are a large campus. In the fall of 2015, our enrollment was 51,000 students, of which 51% were women, 49% were men. I also think we're a commuter school in that we have less than 10,000 beds in the dorms. We are in a growing town. Many of our undergraduates in particular come from small towns with little diversity experience. And for them, coming to UT Austin is a big change, and it's the first time they're away from their parents. So we too see a lot of incidents that occur with freshmen. We have a Title IX office that is operationally falling under the University Compliance Services. We have several deputy Title IX personnel across the campus, in the Dean of Students office, in athletics, in the Office for Inclusion and Equity, which is our EEO office. The deputies work with Dr. LaToya Smith, reporting incidents, and in the case of the Office for Inclusion and Equity, they handle investigations when the respondent is a staff member or a faculty member. The Dean of Students office has 3 units which support Title IX. The Student Emergency Services unit provides accommodations and support. There are Title IX investigators then who investigate Title IX incidents when the respondent is a student. If the respondent is a TA or an AI, because they are in that situation both a student and an employee, then the Office for Inclusion, Equity, and the Dean of Students office work together. The Student Conduct and Academic Integrity office within the Dean of Students office handles any discipline that is the result of an investigation. We have found that one of our best practices is to create a Title IX task force. We have members from various entities which meet 6 times a year. The deputies attend, as well as our Voices Against Violence personnel, who are an offspring of our counseling center. Ombudspersons for student, faculty, and staff also attend. The University Police and various other individuals from relevant offices hear updates and then present what actions they are working on to enhance our Title IX presence. In terms of the incidents that we've experienced, the vast majority of them involve students as complainants. Here are our investigation numbers. The number of student complaints are higher than you might see for staff. For example, a freshman might come to the university and then be shocked to find out that a boy who sexually assaulted her in high school is also a freshman at UT. She reports it, but it's not investigated. That would be an example. However, she would still receive support and perhaps a no contact order if that was appropriate. So for the academic year 2012-13, we had 27 investigations. In 2013-14, we had 100. In 2014-15, we had 140. In 2015-16, we had 286. And in 2016 to just December 31st of 2016, we've had 195. Every year they grow. Of these, 30% were sexual assaults, 30% were harassment conduct issues, 15% were dating and domestic relationship issues, and 15% were stalking and surveillance issues. The Office for Inclusion and Equity generally has 10 to 11 incidents every year. They involve sexual harassment and our definition of sexual misconduct, which is inappropriate, unprofessional behavior of a sexual nature that does not rise to the level of sexual harassment. We see mostly that used aside from sexual harassment. We do not think that these numbers are increasing because there are more incidents, but rather students here understand that we're here to help. They come to seek help and often to report. So of the reports that are investigated, 45% of the complainants involved have a respondent that is unknown. So those cases are closed. About 17% of our investigations result in student discipline, which would involve deferred suspension or expulsion. And currently, if someone is expelled for a Title IX incident, it is now recorded on their transcript. We have had a situation that was very severe where a brilliant student repeatedly sexually assaulted someone and then changed universities when he got called in for discipline. Because there was no indication of this on transcripts, he was admitted to 6 different institutions. We decided when that occurred that this obviously perpetuating a perpetrator to continue to take these actions was totally wrong, and so expulsion is now on our transcripts. In terms of training, training is required for all incoming students, graduate students, and undergraduates. The Title IX deputies and those who are responsible for investigations are also trained on a yearly basis. Staff and faculty take a required online module every 2 years that's required by the state of Texas. In terms of the challenges that we face is training on such a large campus. For example, in-person training as opposed to online training. We've trained in the past year 2,553 students, faculty, and staff. That doesn't begin to touch a community of approximately 72,000 people. Communicating awareness is always a challenge. Faculty-staff harassment is also a challenge because it's different and it's viewed differently. We too have vulnerable populations, transgender issues, particularly with respect to bathrooms, will be an interesting issue in Texas as we have some legislation proposed about bathrooms. In terms of our best practices, we would suggest that a 2-investigator model is essential for appropriate investigations. You may have a problem because you may not be deep enough to have more than 2. We have 6 investigator positions. So they go out in pairs because one writes notes and then the other is asking questions, and it just is a best practice. We also have, as I mentioned before, collaborative investigations between the Dean of Students' Office and the Office for Inclusion and Equity. We have received unbelievable support and engagement from administration and leadership, and obviously that is key as we keep asking for more money to do more things. We take Title IX very seriously here. The Title IX Task Force has been very helpful because not only does it learn and provide learning to others, but it also takes information back. It's been very important to have the Chief of Police for the University of Texas attend these task force or a representative so that they understand their role. We've also done some interesting things in terms of research. So back in the last year, we participated in the AAU study that many schools did. I think 33 institutions participated. We were not very happy with the results of that because we had little, if any, control over the questions that were asked. So our chancellor of the UT system has 15 different institutions, all independent, but reporting up to a single chancellor. So the chancellor supported and provided money for what we're calling a class project, a CLASE, and it involves several things that we think will be very important. There is a general campus climate survey that will be provided to students. There will be focus groups held, and we also have created a cohort study that over the next 4 years we're going to be looking at this cohort to see if prevention really does have an influence on the numbers. We're very excited about this. We're rolling out as a system. All the institutions are rolling out their data at the end of the month. So that'll be very interesting and perhaps shocking when we see some of the numbers. Student Emergency Services provides accommodations and remedies, much like you indicated, in terms of whatever it takes to make someone feel safe and secure. And a new initiative that we're starting is confidential advocates. So we're going to have some folks that you can, as a complainant or a respondent, that you can talk to and feel confidential and share your feelings and get some advice and guidance. Obviously, they will not participate in the investigations. That would be a separate function. But we provide a lot of help to our complainants and survivors, but increasingly respondents also need some help, and so I think these confidential advocates will be very beneficial. So that's a brief summary of what we're doing, some of which you all are doing as well, and it's nice to talk to other collaborators across the country so that we can compare our steps. We have several student-initiated programs. Get Sexy, Get Consent is one of them because consent is a big issue. We have a Voices Against Violence section that also helps students. We have an open mic, Take Back the Night kind of program where students can say what they have experienced and get support. We too provide bystander intervention. And I would encourage you to look at our Title IX website. It's really quite impressive. And we have tabs that you can utilize to whether you're a respondent or a complainant or how to report. We have online reporting mechanisms as well as just verbal reporting mechanisms. So I think we've done an incredible job in the last year in particular with Dr. Smith leading us forward. So with that, I'll turn it over, I guess, to questions from the group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions? Linda has 2 questions. Oh, Linda has 2 questions.
Okay, this is Sandra, and we do have a couple of questions that have come in. What are your thoughts about making every professional employee a mandated reporter of TIX matters?
Who wants to take that question? Or
well, I can respond to that. So in 2015, our Board of Regents came up with a definition of who is what we're calling, or they said we were calling, a responsible employee. Responsible employees are people, their titles, who are perceived by students to have power. Now, they may and do include like TAs and AIs who don't think they have any power, but they're perceived to have power. So we have all faculty are perceived to have power, administrators. We don't go down too deep, but there you can look on our website and see the policy. We have lots of advisors, counselors, all sorts of people. Those people that someone would go up to get help from are the people that we call responsible employees. When we looked at what other schools are doing, many schools had all of their employees down as mandatory reporters. We did not think that would work on our campus.
Okay, very well. Thank you. Here's another question. Can you describe the difference between consult and investigate with regards to the categories used in the diagram? Kim, I believe that's from your school.
Okay, I'll have Ginger respond to that.
Excellent.
As stated on this slide, we have a three-pronged approach. When an individual comes in and we sit down and we talk with them about their concerns, we assess the information that we're receiving at that point to determine whether or not it would rise to initiating a formal investigation. And sometimes they don't all rise to that level. So for those complaints that do not rise to the level of a formal investigation, then we follow up with those in the method of what we consider consult. So an example I think that I gave was, say we got a complaint around someone, domestic violence, where the respondent was a non-IUPUI affiliate. Then I would have a conversation with that individual, can think about one of my recent reports where a staff member came in and she shared that an ex-boyfriend was threatening her. She felt potential dating violence, stalking. So her ex-boyfriend doesn't have any association with IUPUI, but she's one of our employees, and we wanted to make sure that she was safe on campus and what resources we could hook her up with and what type of interim measures could we put in place for her. So thinking about a safety plan in her workspace, and there were other things that she was requesting. So we considered that a consult versus not something that we would initiate a formal investigation. Does that help answer that question?
And then just let me add this. Sometimes I'll do a student quickly or briefly, student on student. Sometimes between students, it can be an attempted pass gone bad. A guy asked a girl out and she might have said yes, and then she changed her mind, and then he asked her again, and she didn't like it. She wanted someone to know that, this guy was making her uncomfortable, but don't do anything about it. That's not an investigation. Let's do faculty and the student. So a student is in a faculty member's class, and the faculty member may float out some profanity. Okay, we're going to go and whack a finger in that professor's face, or have let's temper the type of dialogue if it's not relevant to the material content that you're presenting. But we're not going to formally investigate the fact that a faculty member, cursed in class. So, but students report everything, which we want them to. But those kinds of things doesn't rise to a level of a formal investigation. So we call it a consult because we heard them. We're going to do something about it. We're going to go and have a conversation with the faculty member and/or the chair or the dean, and talk about the perceptions of students as it relates to how a faculty member is using language that students believe to be inappropriate.
Great, thank you. Another question we have here is, how can a confidential advocate be allowed to meet with the survivor as a support person and listen to the circumstances, but not be required to report or be a part of the investigation without having a license?
Margot, you want to take that, or no?
That's not my campus model.
Okay. Linda, did you talk about that?
Yeah, so I mentioned, we do already have several places on campus where there are licensed counselors, such as the Counseling Center, the Employee Assistance Program. These are going to be somebody different, and it's something that we're proposing because we need it. We know it's a issue that has to be dealt with. And I can't answer the question because we haven't hired anybody to do it yet. But so I don't know whether they're going to be licensed. I tend to think that they won't be, but they too will be confidential. People need a place to go where they feel safe. Sometimes going to the counseling center doesn't feel good to them. We'll see how it works, and maybe a year from now we'll report back and tell you whether we did something really wonderful or we don't do it anymore.
Excellent. Well, at this point, I know we are out of time, but before the system shuts us down, I'm not sure what's going to happen. I want to thank our panelists, Linda Millstone, Margot Foreman, Ginger Arvin, and all the participants online who participated in the webinar. Our presentation materials, all the slides will be available to everybody online. And if you have any questions that you didn't really get answered, feel free to reach in to Linda, Margot, Ginger, or myself, and we can help navigate further dialogue offline from the webinar. Again, thank you for your participation. I really appreciate it.
Okay, and I just have a couple plugs here. I'm going to share my screen. And bear with me a minute here. Just a little bit of a reminder that the AAAED has some training coming up in Atlanta at the end of this month. Actually, not the end of this month, it's March. So that you'll have that on your slide deck. And I'm going to share my screen here. Actually, for some reason, Kim, I still have you in there. Okay, unfortunately, we're having some technical challenges. Let me do this, see if I can share it this way. One more time. Nope. Anyway, there is training, BDTI, PDTI, Shaping Your Future is going to be in Atlanta in March. And then, of course, we have the national conference. There is a slide in there that you'll receive on that. So these are certainly great opportunities to continue this discussion. And again, thank you all for your participation, and have a great day.
Thank you.